Hello, my name's David Gill. I'm just making a short video on time management. One thing I would point out is I am nearly completely untrained on time management, and you should not use this video for reference or in general. Take me seriously. Uh, One of the first things I think of with time management is organization. I like to keep notes on daily tasks. It makes it easier for when I am continuing a task the next day. If your company has a customer relations management system or a CRM, I'd recommend using it. It allows you to share what you've done with other people, which also might include customer. And images are very important. They're a wonderful resource when you're referring back to something and kind of forgotten how to do it. You can use them even years later. At the end of the day, try to set some time aside to plan what you're going to do tomorrow. And the reason I'd recommend end of day is because you have a really good idea of what you had gotten done that current day. You probably got a pretty good idea of what you need to do tomorrow. Don't get caught up in one method of organization because, for example, at the end of the day, you go home and maybe you want to organize your home life, or when you move on to another company, you might use a completely different system. Prioritizing tasks is terribly important for time management. Great way to do it is ask higher management. When there's conflicts between projects, maybe some of the things to consider is the monetary value to the company or the time it takes you to do a project. Sometimes doing the project that takes less time can be a better process because it gets one of those tasks out of your queue. What do you get from it? So when this project's done, what do you actually get for it? For example, if you're doing a lot of projects for other people, maybe you should be doing things that reward you more directly. With that in mind, keep in mind that people are terribly important and they are a resource, and you do want to invest into people. I don't want to insinuate that you don't want to invest in them. People are terribly important. Only accept what you can do. This can be incredibly important for prioritizing tasks because if you have too many, it doesn't matter the priority if you don't have enough time. Sometimes failure is an option. You just can't make the deadline. When that happens, go through your tasks, find out if anybody's willing to negotiate on the deadlines, and that can help you save you a lot in a lot of instances. If you're stressed about the tasks, maybe you have too many tasks, maybe you have to offload tasks to other people, maybe you don't actually know how to do your tasks, and maybe you have to get some training or ask other people how to do it. Take from others. A lot of the times, this work has already been done, and people really enjoy sharing their knowledge. And when you do it, make certain to ask the person, but most of the time, they're not only going to be happy, a lot of the times, they'll flat out be excited to share the work that they've done. So when you use somebody else's previous work methods, a lot of the time they'll keep very detailed notes, and they might even, for example, have notes on ordering some of the resources or ordering some of the tools. Or if it's a task they're done with, they might literally have the resources or the tools left over from when they had done it, and they might be able to let you borrow it. Give to others. And this is, I cannot stress enough, terribly important. And I'd only recommend to document your work processes if you want to get frequent raises and promotions, because one thing a company is almost always going to recognize if they're a good company is when you save them time, because that is exactly the same. And in my opinion, more important than saving them money. Sometimes you have to say no. This gets more important the more senior you are in a role, more senior you are in a career. Usually, if you're newer in a role or newer in a career, maybe you don't get to say no as often, or maybe you shouldn't say no as often. So that's one thing to consider. And simply saying no is probably not the right way to say no. And usually, the best way to say no is make the requester the one that's telling you no after they've asked you to do something. Kind of one of the go-to ways to do that is just a general example is let them know that they're number 11 in your task queue and it's going to be 12 or 13 months until you can get it done. You wish you could get it done sooner, but you can't. Make certain it's the truth. That's terribly important. Just don't simply say it's going to be 12 months when it won't, but make certain that they know how long it's going to take. And a lot of the times they'll say, "Oh, well, that's too long. I'll have to go on to the next person." When you're accepting tasks, notoriety is not always a positive thing. If you have too many projects, too many tasks, and you don't get them done, you might get notarized for being somebody who has taken too many tasks and didn't get them done. And this one is one not everybody, I would recommend for everyone because simply not everybody can do parallel tasks. It's also almost always considered multitasking and it's almost always frowned on. So it is not for everybody. The one way I do it is I actually pretend tasks are more simple than they actually are. For example, I'll pretend that I'll get an analogy. It's like putting bacon on the stove before your eggs because the bacon takes longer to cook. And I'm doing a task that's much more complicated than cooking breakfast, but the analogies help me when I'm going through and doing them because it helps me know when to do these items in parallel and when to focus my time as I'm going through and doing them. This is terribly important. You have to take, if you're going to do parallel tasks, you have to take notes because maybe there's a rare person, but it's unlikely you're going to be able to memorize exactly where you are in all tasks. Parallel tasks can be very useful in a high bureaucracy environment because maybe when you put in a request, it could be days or weeks before you hear back from it. The more is often the merrier. So as you're going through, parallel can be parallel among multiple people as well, which is probably the one place where multitasking isn't frowned upon. But be certain to be wary of the tasks you do this with because not everything can be multitasked review when one of the things to review is very important is the deadlines can change and when you take a project, one of the most important first things to review is ask the person who asked you some questions. Make certain that what they're asking is understandable to you, and maybe take what their words, translate them into what you understand, and hand them back to make certain that there's no miscommunications between the two of you. As you're going through and doing a task, you might find that there is a better way to do it. And if there is, you might want to consider doing it that better way. Because you have to remember that the outcome is the desired result, not the way you're actually doing these tasks. It's the reward, quote, reward at the end that you're looking for. I'd recommend to try reviewing your tasks on a daily basis. It really helps you choose what you're going to wind up doing with your next day of work. And when everything's important, and when everything's done, one of the most important things to do is to be proud of what you've accomplished. Make certain to look back on the things that you've done and be happy of what you've completed. And if you're not, you should probably consider changing some things so that you are happy with what you've accomplished. Again, my name is David Gill. This video is by somebody inexperienced with time management, officially inexperienced with time management, and should not be used for review. But thank you for listening and have a good day.